allocated to man when God created man. And so when we talk about the fall, it is the lack of those 5 things that we call the fall. We consider the fall. Man's depravity or inability to access those 5 things that were made available to him is what we call the fall. And so it's important to know the 5 things allocated to man before the fall of man. And the first thing the Bible outlined was in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26. The Bible said, let us make man, that's God speaking, in our own image. So the first thing God gave to man was his image. Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our own image. And I told you the image of God is not what you think it is. For example, if I say what is the image of man, you can go as far as telling me he has 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 2 noses. That's not what the image of God is. The image of God is actually the glory of God. And so in Hebrews chapter 1 from verse 1 to 3, it says, God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophet, has in this last day spoken unto us by his Son, who being the brightness of his glory, the express image of his person. So the glory of God is the image of God, and the glory of God is the full weight of God's essence. So when God created man, he gave himself to man as a token. So man's asset in the garden were not the fruits, they were not the things surrounding him. That's why the Bible said the value of man is not in the multitude of his possession. Man's true asset were not the things that he had at his disposal. Man's true asset was the glory of God that he had. And the moment man lost that, there was a vacuum in his spirit that could not be satisfied. If you will find value in anything apart from God, it means you still have not retained the glory of God. Because the value of man was not in the things he had. It was the fact that he carried the fullness of God. The fullness of God tabernacled in him. And if you look at Jesus, who is the first full man, or the first man who walked in the stature of a man, in Colossians chapter 1 verse 9, the Bible said it pleased the Father that the fullness of the Godhead should dwell in him. Colossians 2:9, the fullness of the Godhead should dwell in him. So Jesus never ascribed value in anything around him. He ascribed value to what was on his inside. So he said, until now I walk. He said, the Father that is in me doeth the work. So everything about Jesus was what he carried. But when man fell, he lost the glory. Number 2 thing that God gave to man is still in Genesis 1:26. He said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness. The word likeness there speaks of the character of God. So it was natural for the man to live out the character of God. The man knew no sin. The man had power to live righteously. The reason is because the character of God was instituted, was downloaded into him. So everything the man did was according to the dictates of God's nature. He didn't do anything that was contrary to God because he had the character of God. It was natural for the man to do the will of God. When we say man is falling, it's because he no longer sustains the capacity to express the character of God. And Jesus told us in John chapter 8 verse 44, when he was speaking to the Pharisees who religiously tried to meet up God's standard, he said, you are of your father the devil. The lust of your father shall ye do. The reason is because when God created the man could live out the character of God. His nature was the nature of love. But now that he's fallen, he's driven by lust. So when Jesus saw these people, even though they were highly religious, he told them, you live by the power of lust. The character of God is not what